The first thing she saw when the blindfold came off was not a mansion. It was a small white house. A real home. There was a wooden swing beneath an old tree, flowers lining the walkway, and a tiny porch with 2 chairs facing a quiet garden. Above the front door hung a simple wooden sign that made her heart stop. Welcome home. For several seconds, she could not speak. Then she turned slowly toward the man standing beside her. Hope. He reached for her trembling hand and whispered that this was the life he had promised her. But what she did not know was that this little house had taken months to prepare, and Jae-hyun had risked something far more precious than money to give it to her. Something he had never been willing to risk before. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to @Physial_threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. For years, everyone who knew Kang Jae-hyun believed he had everything. He owned luxury hotels across Seoul, private offices overlooking the Han River, expensive cars that arrived with security escorts, and a mansion so enormous that guests sometimes joked it looked more like a palace than a home. But behind the walls of that mansion lived a woman who had almost nothing she truly wanted. Her name was Nia Bellamy. Nia was a beautiful African woman with warm brown skin, expressive eyes, and a quiet strength that had surprised Jae-hyun from the moment they met. She had never been impressed by his wealth. That was the first thing he noticed about her. The second was that she never treated him like a powerful man. Everyone else stood when Jae-hyun entered a room. Nia simply looked up from whatever she was doing and asked if he had eaten. At first, he had found it irritating. He was accustomed to fear. He was accustomed to obedience. He was accustomed to people carefully choosing every word around him. Nia did none of that. When he came home late, she did not ask about business. She asked whether he was tired. When he bought her expensive jewelry, she thanked him politely before asking if they could instead spend the evening walking somewhere, without security following them. And when he once surprised her with an entire luxury wardrobe, she smiled and told him she would rather have one comfortable sweater. That was when Jae-hyun realized something uncomfortable. His wife did not want his world. She wanted him. Unfortunately, giving her himself was harder than giving her diamonds. Jae-hyun's life had been built around control. He had inherited a dangerous organization from his father when he was still young, and over the years he had transformed it into something far more powerful. Publicly, he was a respected businessman and CEO. Privately, his name carried a different kind of weight. People feared disappointing him. People feared crossing him. And most of all, people feared getting close enough to discover what he cared about. That was why Nia had always been his greatest weakness. She was the one person he could not control. And slowly, she was becoming the one person he could not imagine losing. But Nia was beginning to feel lonely. Not because Jae-hyun was cruel. That would have been easier. He was simply absent. There were nights when she waited for him until midnight. There were mornings when he left before she woke. There were weekends when business suddenly changed their plans. Every time she tried to complain, she stopped herself because she knew the life he lived was complicated. Still, loneliness did not disappear simply because a person understood it. One rainy evening, Nia sat alone beside the enormous windows of their mansion. Outside, the garden lights reflected against the wet pavement. She watched couples in the distance walking beneath umbrellas near the road beyond the estate. Ordinary people. Laughing. Holding hands. Going home together. Nia smiled sadly. She did not want the mansion. She wanted a small kitchen where she could burn breakfast without 10 servants pretending not to notice. She wanted to go grocery shopping with her husband. She wanted to sit beside him on a sofa and watch an old movie without his phone ringing every 20 minutes. She wanted to wake up and know that he would still be there. That night, when Jae-hyun finally returned home, he found her sitting in the dark. He stopped at the doorway. Nia looked exhausted. He immediately knew something was wrong. He walked toward her and asked what happened. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she finally told him the truth. She was tired of living like a prisoner inside a beautiful palace. The words struck him harder than she realized. Nia quickly explained that she was not blaming him. She knew he worked hard to protect her. She knew the security around the mansion existed because of the world he came from. But she wanted something simple. A normal life. Just one day where she could forget who her husband was. One day where nobody watched them. One day where he could walk beside her without guards several steps behind. Her voice became softer as she told him that she did not need another diamond. She did not need another designer dress. She did not need another luxury car. She simply wanted her husband. Jae-hyun remained silent. For perhaps the first time in their marriage, he had no answer. Nia assumed he had rejected her. She stood and walked toward the stairs. But before she reached them, his voice stopped her. He told her to trust him. She turned around. His face was still unreadable, but something in his eyes had changed. He promised her that she would have the normal life she wanted. Nia did not know what he meant. Neither did she know that Jae-hyun had already begun planning something that very night. The next morning, Nia woke up to an unusually quiet mansion. There were no servants outside her bedroom, no security personnel moving through the hallway. And strangely, Jae-hyun was already waiting for her downstairs. He was dressed casually. No expensive suit. No tie. No visible bodyguards. Nia stared at him in surprise. He told her they were going somewhere. She asked where. He refused to answer. Instead, he handed her a small box. Inside was a simple white scarf. He asked her to trust him one more time. Nia laughed nervously and asked whether this was another one of his mysterious business surprises. He simply smiled. Then he gently tied the scarf over her eyes. For the first time in years, Nia heard him laugh. It was quiet. Almost boyish. And somehow that frightened her more than his cold silence ever had. Because Jae-hyun never laughed without a reason. The car began moving. Nia listened to the sound of the city disappearing behind them. For nearly an hour, she tried to guess where they were going. Every time she asked, Jae-hyun gave her the same answer. Just wait. But what Nia did not know was that the man driving her away from the life she had complained about had spent months secretly building the life she had once described as impossible. And as the car finally came to a stop, Jae-hyun reached for her hand. His fingers were warm. His voice was unusually gentle. He told her that they had arrived. Nia's heart began racing. She had no idea that when the blindfold came off, everything she believed about her husband was about to change. Nia felt Jae-hyun step closer. For a moment, she could hear nothing except the soft sound of wind moving through the trees. Then his fingers slowly loosened the scarf around her eyes. The light made her blink. She looked ahead and froze. The house was smaller than anything Jae-hyun had ever bought for her. It was not surrounded by enormous walls or guarded gates. There were no cameras pointed toward the garden. No line of black luxury vehicles stood outside. There was only a beautiful white house with dark wooden windows, a little porch, a stone walkway, and flowers growing along both sides. A swing hung beneath a large tree. 2 chairs sat on the porch, and beside the front door was a small wooden sign. Welcome home. Nia covered her mouth. She looked at Jae-hyun, then back at the house. She could not understand. This was not the kind of surprise she expected from him. He had spent years giving her things that cost more money than she could imagine. But this place looked as though someone had built it with love instead of money. Jae-hyun watched her carefully. He told her that he remembered everything she had said that rainy night. The small kitchen. The garden. The quiet mornings. The grocery store trips. The evenings without security guards. The simple life. Nia's eyes filled with tears. She asked him how long he had been planning this. He admitted that he had started the project months ago, long before she realized how seriously he had taken her words. Nia slowly walked toward the house. She touched the wooden sign with trembling fingers. It was such a simple thing. But somehow, that small sign meant more to her than every expensive gift he had ever placed in her hands. Jae-hyun followed her quietly. He told her the house belonged to them, not to his company, not to his family, not to the organization. Them. Nia turned around. She asked what he meant by that. He explained that he had created a separate life for them away from the city. A place where his name did not control every room. A place where she could wake up without feeling watched. A place where he could come home and simply be her husband. For a woman who had spent years surrounded by luxury, Nia suddenly realized that this was the most expensive thing Jae-hyun had ever given her. His time. His vulnerability. His willingness to change. She walked toward him and wrapped her arms around his waist. For several seconds, Jae-hyun remained completely still. He was not used to affection that demanded nothing from him. Then his arms slowly closed around her. And for once, he held his wife as though there was nowhere else he needed to be. But the surprise was not finished. Jae-hyun gently took her hand and led her inside. Nia expected another display of wealth. Instead, she saw a home. There was a modest living room with soft furniture. A small kitchen stood nearby. There were shelves filled with books she had once mentioned wanting to read. On the refrigerator were little photographs of the two of them. Some were from their wedding. Others were photographs Nia did not even remember taking. One showed her laughing while eating ice cream. Another showed her sleeping against Jae-hyun during a long flight. Another showed them walking through a quiet street. Nia stared at the photographs. She realized he had been paying attention all along. He had simply never known how to say it. Then she noticed something on the kitchen counter. A small basket. Inside were ingredients. The exact ingredients she used when making the simple breakfast she loved. She laughed through her tears. Jae-hyun admitted that he had tried cooking it himself. Nia looked at him in disbelief. The feared Mafia boss who could intimidate entire rooms had apparently stood in this tiny kitchen trying to cook breakfast. She asked whether he had actually cooked. He confessed that the first attempt had been terrible. Nia laughed harder. And that laugh was exactly what he had hoped to hear. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. But then Nia noticed something strange. There was a second bedroom. The door was closed. She asked who it belonged to. Jae-hyun hesitated. Only for a moment. But Nia noticed. He told her they would open it together later. That answer made curiosity rise inside her. Still, she trusted him. They spent the afternoon exploring the house. There was a little garden at the back, a wooden dining table, a tiny laundry room, even a small garage with an ordinary car. Nia stared at the vehicle and laughed when Jae-hyun told her it was the car he planned to use when they went shopping together. No armored convoy. No drivers. Just the two of them. The idea sounded almost impossible, but that was exactly what made it beautiful. That evening, they sat on the porch. The sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. Nia rested her head against Jae-hyun's shoulder. For a while, neither spoke. Then she told him that she had never needed him to become a different man. She only wanted him to let her see the man underneath the reputation. Jae-hyun looked toward the fading sunlight. He admitted that he had spent his entire life believing love was something dangerous, because anything he loved could become a weakness someone might use against him. But Nia had changed that belief. She had shown him that love could also become the reason a man finally wanted to change. Nia reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But what she did not know was that Jae-hyun had not told her everything. The house was not simply a gift. It was part of a much larger decision. A decision that could change the future of his entire organization. For months, Jae-hyun had been quietly preparing to step away from the criminal world that had controlled his life. He had begun transferring legitimate businesses into independent management. He had reduced his involvement in dangerous operations. He had even started arranging for trusted people to handle matters he once controlled personally. He had not told Nia because he wanted to be certain. He wanted to give her a promise he could actually keep. But there was one final obstacle. His family. Jae-hyun's older cousin, Min-suk, had spent years believing that the family empire belonged to him. When he learned that Jae-hyun was preparing to walk away, he became furious. Not because he cared about Jae-hyun, because he feared losing influence. And when Min-suk discovered the existence of the new house, he understood exactly what it represented. Jae-hyun was choosing his wife over the life his family had built for him. That night, while Nia slept peacefully upstairs, Jae-hyun stood alone outside the house. His phone vibrated. He looked at the message. It was from Min-suk. The message was short. You cannot leave this life whenever you want. Jae-hyun stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. Your wife will not understand what you are sacrificing for her. Jae-hyun's expression hardened. He deleted the messages. But he knew this was not over. The following morning, Nia woke to the smell of breakfast. She walked downstairs and found Jae-hyun standing awkwardly in the kitchen. He had clearly tried again. This time, the food looked slightly better. Nia smiled. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. He turned around and looked at her. For a brief moment, the feared Mafia boss disappeared completely. He was simply a husband standing in a small kitchen with the woman he loved. Then Nia noticed something. His smile disappeared. His phone had started vibrating on the counter. Jae-hyun looked at the screen. His eyes changed instantly. Nia knew that look. Something was wrong. He stepped outside to answer the call. Nia watched him through the window. She could not hear what was being said, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Then Jae-hyun turned toward the house. Their eyes met through the glass. And for the first time since they arrived, Nia saw fear in his expression. Not fear for himself. Fear that the beautiful life he had finally built for her might not survive. And before he could walk back inside, another car appeared at the end of the road. Jae-hyun immediately moved toward Nia. He told her to stay inside. But she could already see who was stepping out of the vehicle. Min-suk had come. And he was carrying something that would force Jae-hyun to reveal the one truth he had been desperately trying to hide. The car stopped at the edge of the property. Nia stood behind the living room window, watching as Min-suk stepped out. He was dressed in an expensive dark coat, but unlike Jae-hyun, there was nothing warm about his expression. Jae-hyun walked toward him before he could come any closer to the house. The two men stood several feet apart. Nia could not hear their conversation through the glass, but she could tell immediately that this was not a friendly visit. Min-suk held a thick folder in one hand. He raised it slightly. Jae-hyun's face hardened. Whatever was inside that folder mattered. A lot. After several tense minutes, Min-suk finally turned and returned to his car. Before leaving, he looked directly toward the house. His eyes met Nia's. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that made her stomach tighten. Jae-hyun remained outside until the car disappeared down the road. When he finally came inside, Nia was waiting for him. She did not ask what happened immediately. She simply looked at him. Jae-hyun knew that she deserved the truth. He told her that Min-suk had discovered what he was planning. Nia asked what he was planning. Jae-hyun took a slow breath. He told her that he was leaving the life he had inherited. Not running from it. Not hiding. Leaving. For years, he had convinced himself that the only way to protect the people he loved was to remain powerful. But he had finally understood something. As long as he stayed inside that world, Nia would never have the normal life she wanted. So he had spent months creating a legal future for them. The hotels. The companies. The investments. The businesses. Everything had been arranged so that he could step away without destroying the people who depended on him. Nia stared at him. She realized that the little house was not simply a romantic surprise. It was the beginning of a new life. A life he had been secretly preparing for both of them. She asked him why he never told her. Jae-hyun looked down. Because he had been afraid. The confession surprised her. He explained that he had spent his entire life making promises he could not afford to break. He did not want to tell her he was changing and then fail. He wanted to make sure the door was actually opened before asking her to walk through it with him. Nia's eyes filled with tears. She stepped closer. She told him that she did not need certainty. She only needed him to stop carrying everything alone. That sentence broke something inside him. Jae-hyun lowered his head. For the first time, Nia saw the exhaustion he had hidden behind his cold expression. The pressure. The responsibility. The fear. He had been carrying all of it for years. And she finally understood that the powerful man everyone feared was also a man who desperately wanted somewhere safe to put down his burden. She reached up and touched his face. He closed his eyes. Then he leaned into her hand. It was a small moment. But it was more intimate than any grand romantic gesture. For once, he did not need to be strong. He only needed to be loved. That evening, Nia decided to cook dinner. Jae-hyun tried to help. He was terrible at chopping vegetables. Nia laughed when he nearly destroyed a carrot. He looked offended. She laughed even harder. The kitchen filled with warmth. There were no servants. No guards. No business meetings. Just two people arguing playfully over dinner. And for a few hours, they forgot about everything else. But the following morning brought another surprise. Jae-hyun woke before sunrise. He walked into the garden and found Nia already sitting on the swing. She was holding a cup of tea. He sat beside her. She asked him whether he regretted marrying her. He immediately told her no. Then she asked whether he regretted changing his entire life because of her. He remained silent. Nia looked at him. Jae-hyun finally admitted that he did not know how to live a normal life yet. He had spent too many years surviving. Nia smiled and told him that was okay. They did not have to know everything. They could learn together. That was when Jae-hyun made another promise. He promised that from that day forward, he would never make an important decision about their future without letting her stand beside him. Nia accepted. And then she kissed him. It was gentle. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just a quiet promise between two people who had finally found the same direction. But what they did not know was that Min-suk had already begun his own plan. He could not accept Jae-hyun leaving. Instead of threatening him, he decided to attack the one thing Jae-hyun valued most: his reputation. Within days, rumors began spreading through the business world. People started questioning Jae-hyun's leadership. Some claimed he was becoming weak. Others suggested that marriage had changed him. The whispers eventually reached Nia. She discovered them online one evening. At first, she ignored them. Then she saw an article suggesting that Jae-hyun was abandoning his responsibilities because of his wife. Nia's heart sank. She wondered whether she had become the reason his world was falling apart. When Jae-hyun came home, he immediately noticed her silence. She showed him the article. He looked at it briefly. Then he put the phone down. He told her that none of it was her fault. But Nia shook her head. She told him that perhaps she should leave the house temporarily. Jae-hyun's expression changed. He asked why. She explained that she could not bear becoming another burden he had to protect. He stepped closer. He told her that she was not a burden. She was the reason he had finally discovered what his life was supposed to become. Nia started crying. Jae-hyun pulled her into his arms. He promised that he would not let anyone make her feel guilty for loving him. But then Nia asked the question he had been avoiding. What exactly was inside the folder Min-suk had brought? Jae-hyun went silent. The silence told her everything. There was something else. Something he had not told her. He finally admitted that the folder contained documents connected to his father's old business. Documents that could expose Jae-hyun's involvement in the organization. If those documents became public, the peaceful future he had built could disappear. Nia looked at him. She asked whether he was in danger. He told her no. But she knew him well enough to understand when he was lying. She reached for his hand. Instead of asking him to protect her, she told him that she wanted to protect their future too. That was when Jae-hyun realized something important. He had spent years trying to keep Nia away from every difficult part of his life. But perhaps protecting someone did not always mean keeping them in the dark. Sometimes it meant trusting them with the truth. So he told her everything. He told her about his father, about the organization, about the years he had spent trying to transform a dangerous legacy into legitimate businesses, about the people who depended on him, about the guilt he carried, and about the one secret he had never confessed. He had been planning to leave long before he met her, but he had never found the courage. Nia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she walked toward him. She told him that she did not love him because he was powerful. She loved him because beneath everything else, he was a man who had spent years trying to become better than the life he was born into. Jae-hyun's eyes filled with emotion. He pulled her close. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that perhaps he deserved the life he had promised her. Then his phone rang. This time, it was not Min-suk. It was his lawyer. The lawyer told him that the final documents had been completed. Jae-hyun could officially walk away. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. He looked at Nia. She smiled through her tears. But before they could celebrate, the lawyer added one final detail. Someone had challenged the ownership of the new house. Jae-hyun's smile disappeared. The house had been purchased legally. The documents were clean. But someone had filed a claim saying the property belonged to the family. Nia looked at him. She understood immediately. Min-suk was trying to take away the one place they had built together. Jae-hyun stood slowly. For years, people had known him as a man who responded to challenges with fear and force. But Nia placed her hand in his. She reminded him of the promise he had made. No more running. No more hiding. No more living according to someone else's rules. Jae-hyun looked at her. Then he smiled. This time, there was no fear in his eyes. He told her they would fight for their home the right way, with the truth, with patience, and with everything they had built together. What neither of them knew was that the documents Min Suk had brought contained one final secret, a secret about Jae-hyun's father. And when that truth came to light, it would completely change the meaning of the house Jae-hyun had built for Nia. The next morning, Jae-hyun and Nia returned to the small house together. For the first time since Min Suk had appeared, neither of them spoke about fear. They spoke about the future. Nia made breakfast while Jae-hyun stood beside her, attempting to make coffee without turning the kitchen into another disaster. She laughed when he added too much sugar. He told her that after everything they had survived, he deserved one bad cup of coffee. She smiled and told him that this was exactly what she had wanted. Not perfection, just ordinary mornings with him. But then Jae-hyun's lawyer arrived. He carried the same folder Min Suk had brought. Jae-hyun opened it carefully. Inside were old property records, financial documents, and one handwritten letter. The letter had been written by Jae-hyun's father years before his death. Jae-hyun stared at the handwriting. He had not seen it in years. His father had written about the family business, the properties he had acquired, and the mistakes he had made. But one paragraph made Jae-hyun stop breathing. The house belonged to his mother, not the organization, not Min Suk, not the family. His mother had purchased the property long before Jae-hyun became powerful. She had wanted it to become a peaceful home for her son someday. But after her death, Jae-hyun's father had hidden the property inside the family records because he believed Jae-hyun was too young to understand what it meant. The house had never been part of the criminal empire. It had been separate from the beginning. Jae-hyun looked at Nia. She was standing beside the window, unaware of the tears forming in his eyes. He told her the truth. The house was not simply something he had bought for her. It had once belonged to his mother. She had dreamed of giving Jae-hyun a normal life. And somehow, years later, he had unknowingly chosen the very same place to give that life to his wife. Nia covered her mouth. Suddenly, the little house felt different. It was no longer just their escape. It was a legacy of love. Jae-hyun's mother had wanted her son to have peace. He had spent years believing his destiny was to continue his father's legacy. But now he realized that his mother's greatest wish had been completely different. She had wanted him to leave it behind. That discovery gave him the courage to finally make his decision. He called a meeting with the people who had depended on him for years. He did not threaten anyone. He did not raise his voice. He simply told them that he was stepping away. The legitimate companies would continue under professional management. The people who had worked honestly for him would keep their positions. And the dangerous side of his life would no longer control his future. Some were shocked. Some were angry. But Jae-hyun did not change his mind. For the first time in his life, he was choosing something because he wanted it, not because someone expected it from him. Meanwhile, Min Suk refused to accept the truth. He confronted Jae-hyun one final time. He told him that men like them were not meant to live ordinary lives. Jae-hyun looked at him calmly. He said that perhaps that was why their family had spent generations unhappy. Min Suk accused Nia of changing him. Jae-hyun immediately corrected him. Nia had not changed him. She had simply reminded him who he had been before the world taught him to become cold. That sentence silenced Min Suk. Jae-hyun then handed him the documents proving that the house had always belonged to his mother. There was nothing left for Min Suk to claim. The argument ended without violence. For once, Jae-hyun did not need to prove his strength. Walking away was enough. Weeks passed. Slowly, the life Nia had dreamed about began to become real. They went grocery shopping together. Jae-hyun complained about the price of vegetables, even though he could buy the entire store without noticing the difference. Nia laughed at him. They cooked together. They planted flowers. They argued over which movie to watch. Sometimes Jae-hyun still received business calls. Sometimes his old life tried to pull him back. But now he had something waiting for him at home. Something stronger than fear. Peace. One evening, Nia returned from the garden and noticed that Jae-hyun had disappeared. She searched the house. Then she found a small envelope on the dining table. Her name was written on it. She opened it. Inside was a simple note. Go to the garden. Nia smiled. She walked outside. The sun was setting. The garden was filled with tiny lights. The swing beneath the tree had been decorated with white flowers. At the center of the garden stood Jae-hyun. He was wearing a simple dark suit. No bodyguards. No business associates. No intimidating presence. Just the man she loved. He walked toward her. Then he took something from his pocket. It was not a diamond necklace. It was not an expensive bracelet. It was a small key. He placed it in her hand. He told her that the key represented everything they had built. The house. The garden. Their future. But most importantly, it represented a promise. Nia looked at him. He told her that he had spent years believing he needed power to protect the people he loved. Now he understood that the greatest protection he could give her was a life where she never had to be afraid of losing him to that world. Nia began crying. Jae-hyun gently wiped away her tears. Then he told her there was one more surprise. He led her toward the back of the garden. Nia stopped. A small wooden structure stood beneath the tree. It looked like a child's playhouse. She looked at Jae-hyun in confusion. He smiled. Inside was a tiny room filled with children's books, toys, and a small wooden table. Nia's eyes widened. She turned toward him. Jae-hyun explained that he had remembered something she once said years ago. She had told him that one day, she wanted a home where children could run through the garden without being afraid of the world outside. He had remembered every word. Nia cried harder. She realized the beautiful surprise was never just the house. It was the fact that Jae-hyun had listened. Every little detail had come from something she had once said. The swing. The flowers. The kitchen. The quiet road. The little playhouse. Everything had been chosen because he knew her. She stepped forward and embraced him. Jae-hyun held her tightly. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Nia whispered that this was the first time she truly felt at home. Jae-hyun closed his eyes. He told her that was all he had ever wanted. Not to give her the biggest house. Not to give her the most expensive life. Just to give her somewhere she could breathe. Months later, the mansion was sold. The security gates were removed from their new home. The luxury cars became unnecessary. Jae-hyun still owned successful companies, but he no longer allowed his work to consume every part of his life. He learned to come home early. He learned to cook. He learned that some meetings could wait. And most importantly, he learned how to be present. One quiet morning, Nia stepped onto the porch carrying 2 cups of coffee. Jae-hyun was sitting on the swing. She handed him one. He took a sip and immediately made a face. Nia laughed. She had forgotten to add sugar. Jae-hyun looked at her and smiled. Then he told her that it was perfect. She knew he was lying. But she also knew exactly what he meant. The coffee was imperfect. The house was small. The garden was still unfinished. Their lives were not perfect. But they were finally theirs. Nia rested her head against his shoulder. Jae-hyun held her hand. And beneath the same tree where he had once promised her a normal life, they sat together and watched the morning begin. The man everyone once feared had finally discovered something money could never buy. Peace. And the woman who never wanted his fortune had given him something even more valuable. A reason to come home. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from and comment your favorite moment below, like this video, and subscribe to @Physial_Threads for more emotional Mafia love stories.